The first time I saw her standing at my gate, she was holding a court summons like it was a trophy. Wind rolled across the dry grass of my ranch, carrying dust and the faint creak of old fence posts. I had just poured my morning coffee when I noticed her, heels sinking into dirt she clearly wasn't used to walking on, sunglasses too large for her face, posture rigid with authority she didn't actually have. She didn't wave, she didn't smile. She just held up the envelope and shouted loud enough for the whole valley to hear, "You've been served." I didn't rush, didn't panic, didn't even set my coffee down right away. I just took a slow sip and watched her. Because in that moment, I already knew something she didn't. She thought she was dragging me into a legal fight, but what she'd actually done was walk straight into my world. I bought the ranch 3 years ago, 200 acres of quiet land just outside a growing suburban development, technically outside the boundary lines of the local HOA, though you wouldn't know that from how often they tried to pretend otherwise. The place wasn't fancy, no marble driveways or ornamental fountains. Just open sky, a weathered barn, a modest house, and enough land to breathe again. After 30 years of practicing law, I didn't want luxury. I wanted silence. I wanted distance. And most of all, I wanted control over my own property. That's why I was very careful during the purchase. Title searches, boundary surveys, easement reviews, county records. I checked everything myself. Even hired a second surveyor just to confirm. The result? My land was clean, independent, untouchable by the neighboring HOA, or at least it should have been. The subdivision next door, Willow Creek Estates, had a reputation. Polished houses, manicured lawns, and an HOA board that treated its authority like a monarchy. And at the center of it all was her, Denise Halbrook. HOA president, self-appointed enforcer of community standards. From what I'd heard, she didn't just manage the HOA, she controlled it. Fines, inspections, threat letters, lawsuits. If someone painted their fence the wrong shade of beige, she'd be on their doorstep within hours. But I wasn't in her HOA, and that fact seemed to bother her more than anything. It started small. A letter in my mailbox, no stamp, hand-delivered. Notice of non-compliance. I remember chuckling when I read it. According to Denise, my barn, visible from one corner of the subdivision, was aesthetic pollution and needed to be updated to meet community standards. I didn't respond. A week later, another letter, then another, then came the fines, daily penalties for failure to comply. That's when I finally walked over to the edge of my property where the HOA fence lined up against my land, and there she was, clipboard in hand, judging my ranch like it was one of her manicured lawns. "You've been ignoring official notices," she said without introducing herself. "You've been sending them to the wrong address," I replied calmly. "This property is not part of your HOA." Her smile was tight, controlled. "That's not how we see it." "Well," I said, "good thing the law doesn't care how you see it." That should have been the end of it. But people like Denise don't stop when they're wrong. They escalate. A month later, I came home to find a crew tearing down part of my fence on my land. I didn't shout, didn't run, I just called the sheriff. When the deputies arrived, Denise tried to spin it. "This is HOA property," she insisted. "We're correcting a boundary violation." I handed the deputy a folder from my truck, survey maps, property deeds, county filings. The deputy studied them, then looked at her. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "you're going to want to stop what you're doing." Her expression didn't change, but her voice got sharper. "This isn't over." And she meant it. 2 weeks later, I was served. Trespassing, obstruction, interference with HOA operations. She claimed my fence blocked a community access route and that I had unlawfully restricted entry to land the HOA maintained. It was creative. I'll give her that. Completely baseless, but creative. Most people would panic, hire a lawyer, scramble for defense, try to negotiate. I did none of those things. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table, opened the complaint, and smiled. Because Denise had made a critical mistake. She assumed I was just another homeowner. She didn't know who she was dealing with. I didn't hire an attorney. I became one again. For the next 3 weeks, I treated my ranch like a case file. Every document I'd collected during the purchase, reviewed again, every boundary line, verified, every county record, pulled and indexed. But I didn't stop there. I requested public records from the county, HOA filings, expansion requests, denied petitions, and that's when I found it. 5 years ago, Willow Creek Estates had attempted to expand their HOA boundaries, specifically onto my land. The request was denied, officially, permanently. The documentation was crystal clear. They had no jurisdiction over my property, none. But Denise didn't just ignore that. She buried it. Didn't disclose it to homeowners. Didn't mention it in any of her notices. Instead, she acted like the denial never happened, which, in legal terms, is called a problem. I compiled everything, created a timeline, mapped out every interaction, even documented the day her crew trespassed and damaged my fence. Photos, witness statements, repair invoices. I wasn't just preparing a defense. I was building a counterattack. The hearing was set for a Tuesday morning. Small county courtroom, wooden benches, fluorescent lights. Denise walked in like she owned the place. Expensive suit, confident stride. A lawyer at her side who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. I walked in alone. No suit, no briefcase, just a folder under my arm. When the judge asked if I had representation, I stood. "I'll be representing myself, Your Honor." Denise smirked. That was her second mistake. Her lawyer opened with a polished argument, talking about community integrity, shared access, and property alignment. It sounded good, until it was my turn. I didn't raise my voice, didn't dramatize. I just walked the judge through the facts, line by line, document by document. Then I introduced the county's denial of the HOA expansion request. You could feel the room shift. Denise's lawyer froze mid-note. The judge leaned forward. "Are you saying," he asked slowly, "that the HOA knowingly attempted to enforce authority outside its legal boundaries?" "Yes, Your Honor," I said, "and I have evidence they've been doing so for years." Then I introduced the photos of her crew dismantling my fence, the repair invoices, the sheriff's incident report, and finally, the counterclaim, trespassing, property damage, fraudulent enforcement of HOA authority. By the time I sat down, the smirk was gone from Denise's face. Court didn't end that day. It got worse for her, much worse. The judge ordered a full review of the HOA's practices. County inspectors got involved, then state regulators. Turns out I wasn't the only one she'd pushed beyond her authority. Dozens of homeowners came forward. Fines issued without legal basis, threats made without jurisdiction, records altered. What started as her lawsuit against me became an investigation into her. Her lawyer withdrew within a week. The HOA board tried to distance themselves, but it was too late. Emails surfaced, meeting notes, signatures. They knew, and they let it happen. 3 months later, the final ruling came down. Her case against me? Dismissed, with prejudice. My counterclaims? Upheld. She was personally liable for the trespassing and damages. The HOA was fined for regulatory violations. And Denise? She was removed as president, permanently barred from holding any leadership position within the HOA. But that wasn't the part that mattered most. The part that stayed with me was the moment outside the courthouse. She stood there, smaller somehow, less certain. She looked at me, not with anger this time, but something closer to realization. "You could have just settled," she said quietly. I shook my head. "You could have just stayed off my land." I went back to my ranch that afternoon, repaired fence, standing strong, wind moving across open land. Quiet, just the way I wanted it, and for the first time since she showed up at my gate, no one tried to tell me what to do with what was mine, because some people only understand boundaries. When they finally run into one, they can't cross.